Yesterday, Hezbollah carried out a drone strike in Israel, which I believe resulted in the most casualties inside of the country in a single event since October 7th. Today, we're going to look into what we know so far about that attack and dive into some new footage showing how a United Nations agency failed in their mission to keep Hezbollah at bay. So what we know right now is that Hezbollah conducted a drone attack yesterday near Binyamin, south of Haifa, that killed 4 Israeli soldiers and wounded nearly 60 more, which appears, again, to be the most casualties from a single event inside of Israel since the Hamas attacks on October 7th. Now, according to an initial investigation, Hezbollah launched multiple drones under the cover of a rocket barrage with the hopes of overwhelming local Israeli air defenses. 2 drones then apparently entered Israeli airspace from the sea, one of which was shot down and the other impacted a dining facility at this military base. These look to be Mirsad-type drones, which are sort of the primary type of loitering munition that Hezbollah has used for quite a while now. The Alma Center says that the drones have a 120-kilometer assault range, a top speed of 370 kilometers per hour, with a capacity of carrying up to a 40-kilogram warhead. Now, there is some mixed information coming out right now, but it sounds like one drone was intercepted and then Israeli planes and helicopters pursued the second, but it dropped off the radar, I guess, and Israeli forces kind of lost track of it, probably because it flew relatively close to the ground. Either way, no siren sounded because the assumption was that that second drone had crashed or had been intercepted once it disappeared. Now, Hezbollah did issue a statement related to this attack yesterday on their Telegram channel, saying, quote, "The Israeli enemy bet that the Islamic resistance would not be able to carry out its threat after it carried out vile security operations and assassinated its righteous leaders. Foremost among them, our supreme and most holy martyr, His Eminence, the Secretary General Hassan Nasrallah. After all of the above, the decision of the leadership of the Islamic resistance was to discipline the enemy and show some of the many things that it is capable of at any time it chooses and any place it wants, whether secretly or openly. The target was one of the camps of the elite Golani Brigade in Binyamin, south of the occupied city of Haifa, which is unknown to many settlers. In a qualitative and complex operation, the missile force of the Islamic resistance launched dozens of missiles towards various targets in the area. They exploded in the rooms where dozens of Israeli army officers and soldiers were present who were preparing to participate in the attack on Lebanon, including senior officers, resulting in the killing and wounding of dozens. Now, it is interesting that they labeled this as sort of a response to the killing of Hassan Nasrallah. There's an active war raging right now between Hezbollah and Israel, so there really isn't a need to lay out the rationale for striking military units and facilities, which does appear to be the target in this case. That is, however, kind of a theme throughout this current conflict that we continue to see play out in Gaza. Rarely is there a Hamas attack that's just part of the ongoing fighting. It's almost always claimed as in response to something that Israel did. Now, part of this is designed to portray Hezbollah, Hamas, and others as always being on the defensive. They're simply responding to Israeli aggression. Now, I don't think, personally, there's much validity in that, but honestly, it does seem like it's caught hold with quite a few people around the world. Now, one of the reasons that the fighting continues between Israel and Hezbollah is because UNIFIL, that we're going to get into here in a second, was not able to accomplish their mission of keeping Hezbollah out of southern Lebanon. So it's interesting that right now we're starting to see more and more tension between Israel and this UN organization. Now, as a little background, UNIFIL stands for the United Nations Interim Force in Lebanon, and their mission statement, pulled directly from their website, is to, quote, "assist the Lebanese armed forces in taking steps towards the establishment between the Blue Line and the Litani River of an area free of any armed personnel, assets, and weapons other than those of the government of Lebanon and of UNIFIL deployed in this area." So let's pull up a map here real quick. This area is what they're supposed to keep free of any armed group except for the Lebanese military. Hezbollah is not the Lebanese military, and now, because this peacekeeping force was clearly pretty ineffective, they're dealing not just with Hezbollah, but IDF forces entering southern Lebanon as well. And the failure of UNIFIL isn't really debatable at this point. I mean, even if you want to disregard all of the new IDF footage, a handful of which I'll show here in a second that outlines weapons depots, firing points, tunnel networks, and passageways into Israel, we even have evidence from Hezbollah themselves. You know all that ATGM or anti-tank guided missile footage they like to put out showing their troops firing missiles into Israeli bases along the border? Guess what? The short range of those munitions means that they're recording themselves conducting military operations inside of the blue zone in direct violation of UN Resolution 1701. Now, there's too much time already spent on this, just trying to get ahead of what are bound to be some interesting comments on that front. Now, I know there's a lot of hate thrown around in every direction here, but on a personal note, I really wish UNIFIL had effectively kept Hezbollah at bay. These international organizations are far from perfect, but whenever a peacekeeping mission like this clearly doesn't keep the peace, it disincentivizes current or future conflicts from considering this as an option. It looks toothless, like it's not even there in the first place. Okay, so let's get into now what we know happened, or at least what we know so far. In fact, let's go direct to the source on a few of these so we have the situation painted in their own words. First, we have an official statement from UNIFIL. Yesterday, they put this out saying, quote, "Early this morning, peacekeepers at a UN position in Ramia observed 3 platoons of IDF soldiers crossing the blue line into Lebanon. At around 4:30 a.m., while peacekeepers were in their shelters, 2 IDF Merkava tanks destroyed the position's main gate and forcibly entered the position. They requested multiple times that the base turn out its lights. The tanks left about 45 minutes later after UNIFIL protested through our liaison mechanism, saying that the IDF presence was putting peacekeepers in danger. At around 6:40 a.m., peacekeepers at the same position reported the firing of several rounds 100 meters north, which emitted smoke. Despite putting on protective masks, 15 peacekeepers suffered effects, including skin irritation and gastrointestinal reactions, after the smoke entered the camp. The peacekeepers are receiving treatment. In addition, yesterday, IDF soldiers stopped a critical UNIFIL logistics movement near Maiseh Jebel, excuse my pronunciation, denying its passage. The critical movement could not be completed. For the 4th time in as many days, we remind the IDF and all actors of their obligations to ensure the safety and security of UN personnel and property and to respect the inviolability of UN premises at all times. Breaching and entering a UN position is a further flagrant violation of international law and Security Council Resolution 1701. Any deliberate attack on peacekeepers is a grave violation of international humanitarian law and Resolution 1701. UNIFIL's mandate provides for its freedom of movement in its areas of operations, and restrictions on this is a violation of the resolution. We've requested an explanation from the IDF from these shocking violations." Now, the IDF didn't really respond, at least not that I've seen, to those direct allegations by UNIFIL, but instead kind of laid out the extent that Hezbollah has been operating in the south right alongside UNIFIL and then what the IDF is doing to stop that. The IDF statement said, quote, "Over the past month, approximately 25 rockets and missiles have been launched at Israeli communities and IDF troops from Hezbollah terrorist compounds embedded near UNIFIL posts in southern Lebanon, exploiting their proximity to UN forces. One of the attacks resulted in the death of 2 IDF soldiers. Hezbollah uses compounds located above and below ground to carry out terrorist attacks against the state of Israel. During the IDF's limited, localized, targeted ground raids based on precise intelligence in southern Lebanon, the troops of the 146th Division located hundreds of weapons, including firearms, grenades, and rocket launchers aimed at Israeli territory. These weapons were stored inside underground compounds located a few dozen meters to a few hundred meters from UNIFIL posts situated near the Blue Line. UNIFIL in southern Lebanon was deployed to implement UN Security Council Resolution 1701 to prevent the presence of Hezbollah armed operatives south of the Litani River. However, both the state of Lebanon and the international community have failed to implement Resolution 1701 despite repeated requests to do so. For years, Hezbollah has embedded itself in southern Lebanon in grave violation of UN Security Council resolutions. The organization has stockpiled large quantities of weapons aimed at Israeli civilians over the years and has deliberately built up its attack infrastructure near UNIFIL posts. The IDF's targeted raids are only directed against Hezbollah, and the troops' activities are not directed at UNIFIL posts, forces, or infrastructure. On Thursday, September 30th, prior to the start of the operation, IDF representatives submitted a request to the organization to move its personnel away from posts located within 5 kilometers of the Blue Line, as the area would soon become an active combat zone. Now I want to add some personal assessment here on top of the things that Israel just showed. There's really no excuse for these tunnels, launch points, and weapon storage to be so close to UNIFIL locations. It's one thing to argue whether or not local civilians knew of certain military activities, but the UNIFIL mission is to prevent this specific thing from happening, and it's right there under their nose. Put another way, if we operated like this, the U.S. military in Iraq and Afghanistan, like UNIFIL is operating in Lebanon, we would have had multiple bases overrun. To have an operational tunnel this close to a military facility means the ISR, or recon capabilities, from that base are non-existent, and the troops there are probably not doing any sort of real patrolling. I mean, it doesn't even look like Hezbollah really tried to hide this stuff. Now, I've already seen plenty of folks say that the UN is supporting Hezbollah or something like that. I do think that's a bit of a stretch, but it's pretty clear from a military perspective that this UNIFIL mission was not meeting their objectives, and it kind of just looks like gross negligence. There's really no rational explanation to allow such a significant military buildup so close to these UN bases. The problem here is that if UNIFIL withdraws, then it's kind of they're accepting that this mission failed to keep the peace. So I imagine there's actually some pushback inside of the UN to keep them in place and try to stand up to Israel, if you will. Again, a personal opinion, but I can kind of see both sides here. From Israel's perspective, UNIFIL hasn't done their job to the point where they've had to relocate nearly 100,000 Israeli civilians from the north and are now in a state of open war with Hezbollah. It makes sense that they're not going to wait around for UNIFIL to step up, and honestly, it doesn't seem like the United Nations has the resources on the ground or the political will to forcibly remove Hezbollah from the south. So from Israel's point of view, what choice do they have but to go in and do it themselves? On the other hand, I can understand why the UN would be upset about this and want to stand their ground. They're leaving southern Lebanon just as Israel pushes in not only serves as confirmation of mission failure and likely a reallocation of budget to some degree, which is always kind of a quiet driver in large bureaucracies like the UN, but it does set the stage for the same thing to happen elsewhere. I mean, there are 11 active peacekeeping missions ongoing around the world. Each of those is unique in its own way, but we have to consider that this sets the stage for the UN to lose credibility in some of those other conflict zones. Now, as for now, there are no signs that Israel is planning on stopping anytime soon, and I would expect their ground operations to continue in southern Lebanon while their air force has serviced targets across the entire country. Now, the focus of today's video is on the exchanges in the north, but I do want to mention what we know so far about a significant event in Gaza. Yesterday, some really graphic footage started coming out showing portions of the Al-Aqsa Martyrs Hospital on fire with patients clearly still trapped inside. Israel says they were targeting a command center set up by Hamas on the hospital grounds. From what I've been able to tell so far, it looks like the tent set up alongside the compound caught fire, and that fire quickly spread to where it engulfed a large portion of the camp. Initial reporting right now is that 3 people were killed and 40 wounded in this fire, and I've not yet seen an Israeli response outside of the original statement that a Hamas compound was the focus of the strike. Now, I'm saving up a longer promo for another video, but if you've stuck around this long, I just wanted to let you know that I've teamed up with Help 99 to try to get some new trucks for a few Ukrainian military units. We'll be providing new vehicles with electronic warfare, night vision capabilities, all-weather tires, and more to the Kraken Regiment, GUR Fire Support Group, and Strike Drone Unit of the Separate Artillery Brigade of the Ukrainian National Guard. Look, together, just over the course of like 2 months, we raised $40,000 for the 47th Mechanized, which is crazy. And that whole process taught me that I don't really like the administrative side of fundraising, like tracking every penny, collecting receipts, confirming purchases, vetting contacts, wiring money, all of that and more. I'd rather just hand that off to professionals like Help 99, a 501c3 with countless frontline contacts that have been doing this exact thing for years. So head over to the link in my description to donate, grab a patch, add custom text to a vehicle, or if interested, come along for the delivery of these trucks to the soldiers in Ukraine. Thank you all so much for your support and incredible generosity. I'm excited to keep doing this alongside all of you. But that's all I got for now. Thanks for watching, and I'll see y'all next time.